November 8, 2018. The slap echoed across the training grounds at Fort Carson, and Captain Vincent Hayes smiled, thinking he'd just put Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson in her place until she executed a takedown so precise that even his loyal squad stood frozen. What did the military tribunal uncover that made this case about so much more than one act of self-defense? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Colorado sun beat down mercilessly on the obstacle course that morning, turning the red dirt into a fine dust that coated everything it touched. Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson had been at Fort Carson for 8 months, assigned to the 4th Infantry Division's training command. She'd earned her position through sheer determination, graduating top of her class at West Point, excelling in hand-to-hand combat certifications, and proving herself in 2 deployments overseas. But none of that seemed to matter to Captain Vincent Hayes. Hayes ran the Advanced Tactical Training Program with an iron fist and an ego to match. At 42, he was a career officer who'd spent more time behind a desk than in the field over the past decade. But he wore his rank like a crown. His squad of 8 soldiers worshipped him, or at least they appeared to. Hayes had a way of rewarding loyalty and punishing dissent that kept everyone in line. That morning's exercise was supposed to be routine, a simulated hostage extraction scenario where Lawson's team would coordinate with Hayes's squad. But from the moment the briefing started, Hayes had been undermining her. When she suggested splitting their forces to cover 2 entry points, he'd laughed. When she pointed out a potential vulnerability in his approach, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. His squad members exchanged glances but said nothing. "Listen, Lieutenant," Hayes had said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I've been running these exercises since before you knew how to tie your boots. Why don't you just follow orders and let the experienced officers handle strategy?" Lawson had bitten her tongue. She'd dealt with men like Hayes before, officers who saw female soldiers as decorations rather than equals, who believed rank entitled them to disrespect. She'd learned to pick her battles, to prove herself through actions rather than arguments. But Hayes wasn't finished. The exercise began at 0900 hours. Lawson's team moved into position on the east side of the mock compound, a series of plywood structures designed to simulate an urban environment. Hayes's squad took the west. The plan, such as it was, had Hayes's team making a frontal assault while Lawson's provided cover fire. It was tactically unsound, any first-year cadet could see that, but Hayes had made it clear that questioning his judgment wasn't an option. 3 minutes into the exercise, everything went wrong. Hayes's squad rushed the main entrance without proper reconnaissance, triggering the simulation's defense systems. Blanks fired from automated turrets and red smoke indicating casualties began pouring from their position. In a real scenario, half his team would be dead. Lawson made a split-second decision. She radioed her team to hold position and personally maneuvered around the compound's north side, where she'd identified a secondary entrance during her earlier review of the blueprints. Within 90 seconds, she'd breached the structure, neutralized the simulated hostiles, and secured the mock hostages. The exercise was over. The training observers, 2 senior sergeants monitoring from a safe distance, marked it as a success, though they noted the deviation from the commanding officer's plan. Hayes's face had turned crimson. "Fall in," he barked at both squads as they assembled in the compound center. Dust swirled around their boots as soldiers lined up, sensing the tension. Hayes walked directly to Lawson, invading her personal space in a way that would make any HR representative cringe. "You want to explain what the hell that was, Lieutenant?" His breath smelled of coffee and anger. Lawson kept her voice level, professional. "Sir, the primary approach was compromised. I adapted to complete the mission objective. You undermined my command." Hayes stepped closer, his face inches from hers. You made me look incompetent in front of my own squad. Sir, with respect. The mission parameters. Don't you dare lecture me about mission parameters. Spittle flew from his mouth. You're a glorified diversity hire who thinks one decent deployment makes her a tactical genius. You're nothing but, Captain Hayes. I followed my training and achieved the objective. Lawson's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. If you have concerns about my performance, we can discuss them through proper channels. That's when Hayes lost control. Proper channels? I'll show you proper channels, you insubordinate. The slap came fast, a vicious backhand that snapped. Lawson's head to the side. The sound cracked across the training ground like a gunshot. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Hayes's squad stood motionless, their eyes wide. The observers in the distance started moving toward them. Hayes himself looked almost surprised by his own action, but the cruel smile that followed showed no real remorse. That's what happens when you talk back to a superior officer, he said, his voice low and threatening. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, but it would be analyzed frame by frame in the subsequent investigation. Lawson's training years of martial arts, military combatives, and muscle memory took over. She didn't think. She acted. Her left hand shot up, catching Hayes's wrist before he could fully lower his arm. Simultaneously, her right hand struck his elbow joint, hyperextending it just enough to break his balance. She pivoted on her left foot, using Hayes's own momentum and body weight against him. Her right leg swept behind his knees as she pulled him forward and down. Captain Vincent Hayes hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Lawson had him in a control hold. Before his squad could process what they'd witnessed, her knee on his back, his arm twisted at an angle that promised immediate pain if he resisted, her other hand ready to strike if necessary. Don't move, sir, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I'm defending myself from assault. The training ground erupted into chaos. Hayes's squad members lurched forward, hands moving toward their weapons before remembering these were training exercises, no live ammunition. The 2 observing sergeants were sprinting toward them now, shouting orders. Lawson's own team stood, frozen, torn between loyalty to their lieutenant and the ingrained instinct to never see a superior officer taken down. Release him, that's an order. Sergeant Marcus Webb, Hayes's second-in-command, had his hand on his empty holster, face contorted. With rage, Sergeant Webb, stand down. One of the observers, Master Sergeant Patricia Coleman, arrived, her voice cutting through the confusion with decades of authority. Nobody moves. Lawson, maintain your hold until we sort this out. Hayes was gasping, his face pressed into the dirt, trying to speak through the pain and humiliation. She assaulted. Superior officer. I witnessed the entire incident, Captain, Coleman said coldly, already pulling out her radio. You struck Lieutenant Lawson first. This is now an official incident requiring immediate command investigation. The next 20 minutes were a blur of protocol. Military police arrived within 5 minutes. Fort Carson's main base was less than a mile away. Lawson released Hayes only when ordered to by Coleman, stepping back with her hands visible, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Hayes was helped to his feet by his squad, his uniform covered in red dust, his pride shattered. The MPs separated everyone immediately. Lawson was escorted to one vehicle, Hayes to another. His squad was ordered to remain on site for statements. The training exercise, and what should have been a routine Thursday morning, had transformed into something that would shake Fort Carson's command structure to its foundation. As Lawson sat in the back of the MP vehicle, her hands beginning to tremble with post-adrenaline reaction, she caught sight of Sergeant Webb staring at her with undisguised hatred. Hayes's other squad members wore similar expressions, except for one. Private First Class Jordan Martinez met her eyes briefly, and in that moment, Lawson saw something unexpected. Relief. She didn't understand why, not yet. But she would soon learn that her 2-second response to Captain Hayes' assault had done more than defend herself. She just cracked open a conspiracy that had been rotting the 4th Infantry Division's training command from the inside for the past 3 years. The question wasn't whether she'd been right to defend herself. The question was whether the truth would be enough to protect her from what was coming next. The interrogation room at Fort Carson's military police headquarters was deliberately uncomfortable. Bare walls painted institutional beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, chairs designed to prevent relaxation. Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson had been sitting there for 45 minutes before anyone spoke to her. When the door finally opened, 2 officers entered. Lieutenant Colonel Angela Reeves from the Judge Advocate General's Corps carried a tablet and wore an expression that gave nothing away. Behind her came Major Thomas Bradford from the Criminal Investigation Command, his eyes already studying Lawson like a specimen under glass. "Lieutenant Lawson," Reeves began, taking the seat across from her, "you understand you're not under arrest, but you are required to cooperate fully with this investigation." "Yes, ma'am." Lawson's voice was steady, though her uniform still carried the dust from that morning's confrontation. Bradford remained standing, positioning himself in Lawson's peripheral vision, a classic interrogation technique meant to create unease. "Walk us through what happened. Don't leave anything out." Lawson recounted the morning methodically. The briefing, Hayes' dismissive attitude, the failed exercise, her tactical decision to adapt, and finally the confrontation. When she reached the moment of the assault, she kept her tone clinical, devoid of emotion. "Captain Hayes struck you with an open hand across the face," Reeves said, making notes. "And your response was immediate?" "It was instinctive, ma'am. My training took over." Bradford circled around to face her directly. "Instinctive? You took down a superior officer in under 2 seconds because of instinct?" "I defended myself against a physical assault, sir." "Some might say you used excessive force," Bradford pressed. "Captain Hayes is currently in the medical facility being treated for a hyperextended elbow and bruised ribs. You could have simply stepped back, reported the incident." Lawson met his gaze without flinching. "In the time it would take me to step back, Captain Hayes could have struck me again. Or worse, I neutralized the threat using the minimum force necessary to ensure my safety." Reeves held up a hand, silencing Bradford's next question. "We have 2 master sergeants who witnessed the entire incident. Their statements corroborate your account. However, this situation is complicated by several factors." She tapped her tablet, and Lawson noticed the colonel's expression shift slightly, a crack in the professional facade that suggested discomfort with what came next. "Captain Hayes has filed formal charges against you. Assault on a superior officer, insubordination, and conduct unbecoming. His squad has provided statements supporting his version of events." "His version?" Lawson felt ice in her stomach. Bradford leaned against the wall. "According to Sergeant Webb and 7 members of Hayes' squad, you became verbally aggressive first. They claim Hayes only raised his hand in a defensive gesture, which you misinterpreted as a threat. They say you attacked him unprovoked. The absurdity of it should have been laughable, except Lawson saw no humor in either officer's face. "Master," Sergeant Coleman witnessed. "We're aware of the observer statements," Reeves interrupted. "But we have a delicate situation. 8 soldiers providing testimony that contradicts 2. Captain Hayes has been with the 4th Infantry Division for 11 years, has an exemplary service record, multiple commendations. And I'm the outsider," Lawson said quietly. Bradford's silence was answer enough. Reeves closed her tablet. "You're being placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. You'll surrender your access credentials, remain on base, and make yourself available for further questioning. You're also ordered to have no contact with any potential witnesses. How long will this take?" As long as necessary. Reeves stood, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, sympathy, perhaps, or warning. Lieutenant, I recommend you secure legal representation immediately. This investigation could go directions you're not prepared for. After they left, Lawson sat alone in the interrogation room for another 20 minutes before an MP escorted her out. The walk across base felt like a gauntlet soldiers she passed seemed to already know, their stares ranging from curious to hostile. News traveled fast in military communities, and she could already feel the narrative being written around. Her quarters in the officers' housing felt smaller than usual. She'd barely sat down when her phone buzzed text messages from 3 different people in her unit, each carefully worded, each expressing support while simultaneously distancing themselves from the situation. Professional self-preservation. In digital form, then a number she didn't recognize. LT Lawson, this is PFC Jordan Martinez, we need to talk. Not on base. Tonight, 1900 hours, Rusty's Diner on Highway 115. Come alone. Please, this is important. Lawson stared at the message. Martinez, the young soldier from Hayes's squad, who'd looked at her with that strange expression of relief. Meeting a potential witness violated her direct orders, but something in the urgency of that message made her fingers hover over the reply button. Before she could decide, her door shook with aggressive knocking. She opened it to find Captain Diane Foster, one of the few female officers in the division who'd actually been friendly to her. Pack a bag, Foster said without preamble, pushing past her into the room. Not everything, just enough for a few days. Do it now. What's happening? Foster's usually composed face was flushed, angry. What's happening is that Hayes has friends in high places, and they're circling wagons. Colonel Stewart is being pressured to make an example of you. There's talk of a court-martial being fast-tracked. The witnesses saw. Rebecca, listen. To me. Foster grabbed her shoulders, forcing eye contact. I've been in the Army for 16 years. I've seen this play out before. Hayes runs that training program like his personal kingdom, and nobody questions him because questioning him means questioning everyone who's protected him. You just became the threat that exposes all of them. Lawson's mind raced. The JAG officer Reeves, she seemed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Reeves is one of the good ones, which is exactly why she won't be lead counsel on this. I heard through channels that they're bringing in Colonel Marcus Hendricks from Fort Leavenworth. He's got a 93% conviction rate and a reputation for eating junior officers for breakfast. So what am I supposed to do? Foster released her and began pacing. First, you get proper legal defense. Not just any JAG, you need someone who specializes in military justice and isn't afraid to make waves. Second, you document everything. Every interaction with Hayes before today, every witness, every irregularity you've noticed in his program. I haven't noticed. Then start looking harder. Foster's voice rose, then she caught herself, lowering it to an urgent whisper. Rebecca, Hayes doesn't just have loyal soldiers. He has soldiers who are afraid of him. There's a difference, and if you can figure out why they're afraid, you might have a chance. After Foster left, Lawson sat on her bed, Martinez's message still glowing on her phone screen. Every instinct told her not to go, not to violate orders when she was already under investigation. But Foster's words echoed. Figure out why they're afraid. She typed a single word in response. Confirmed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of phone calls. Her father, a retired Army colonel, listened to her account with growing fury before making calls to contacts he still had in the military legal system. Her former commander from her deployment sent a character reference before she'd even asked. Friends from West Point reached out, their messages a mixture of outrage and offers to help. But beneath all the support, Lawson felt the reality settling in. This wasn't just about one incident. Hayes's reaction, his squad's coordinated statements, the speed at which charges were being filed. This was an institutional response to a perceived threat. She'd broken an unspoken rule by defending herself, and now the machine was grinding into motion to punish that breach. At 1845 hours, as the Colorado sun began its descent behind the Rocky Mountains, Lawson changed into civilian clothes and left through the base's east gate. The MP checking IDs barely glanced at her. She wasn't confined to quarters. Not yet anyway. Rusty's Diner was a 20-minute drive, a worn-down establishment that catered to soldiers seeking cheap food and anonymity. The parking lot was half full when she arrived, and she spotted Martinez immediately. The young private sat in a corner booth, wearing a hoodie despite the warm evening, eyes darting to every person who entered. When Martinez saw her, the private's entire body seemed to exhale with relief. But as Lawson slid into the booth across from her, she noticed something else. Martinez's hands were shaking, and there was a fresh bruise on her jaw that definitely hadn't been there that morning. "Thank you for coming," Martinez said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would. You're risking a lot by being here." "So am I know." Martinez glanced around again, then leaned forward. "Lieutenant, what happened today, that wasn't the first time Captain Hayes has hit someone. And the system that's protecting him, it's bigger and darker than you can imagine." Lawson felt her pulse quicken. "Tell me everything." What Martinez revealed over the next hour would transform the investigation from a simple assault case into something far more sinister, a pattern of abuse, systematic cover-ups, and a network of complicity that reached higher into Fort Carson's command structure than anyone wanted to admit. But it would also put both of them in danger from people who had spent years ensuring certain truths stayed buried. Private First Class Jordan Martinez wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, though. The diner was warm. The bruise on her jaw had darkened to purple, and up close, Lawson could see it wasn't the only mark. There were older, fading bruises on Martinez's neck, partially hidden by the hoodie. 6 months ago, there was another female soldier in the training program, Martinez began, her voice barely above a whisper. Staff Sergeant Nicole Grant. She was sharp, really sharp, better than most of Hayes's squad at tactical analysis. He hated that. Lawson listened without interrupting, though her jaw tightened. Grant questioned one of Hayes's training protocols. During a live-fire exercise, said it violated safety regulations, which it did. Hayes pulled her aside afterward, and we all heard the shouting from inside the equipment shed. When she came out 20 minutes later, her lip was bleeding, and she wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Did she report it? Martinez's laugh was bitter. She tried. Filed a complaint with her chain of command the next day. 72 hours later, she was reassigned to a supply depot in Kuwait. Her entire complaint disappeared from the system like it never existed. The official reason for her transfer? Unit cohesion concerns. Where is she now? No one knows. She finished her deployment, and then she just vanished. Some people say she took a medical discharge. Others say she's working private security somewhere. But before she left, she told me something. Martinez finally met Lawson's eyes. She said she wasn't the first. That Hayes had been doing this for years, and that the system was designed to protect him, not us. Lawson absorbed this, her mind racing through implications. Why didn't you come forward before today? Because I was scared. Because I watched what happened to Grant, and I knew that crossing Hayes meant destroying your career, or worse. Martinez's voice cracked. But when I saw what he did to you today, and when I saw you defend yourself, I realized someone finally had the courage to fight back. And I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The bruise on your face. Hayes? Martinez touched her jaw unconsciously. After the MPs took you away, Sergeant Webb gathered us all. Side we needed to get our stories straight about what happened. I refused to lie. Webb got in my face, started pushing me, said I was either with the squad or against it. When I still wouldn't agree, she trailed off. Webb assaulted you, not just him. Private Daniels held my arms. It was quick, just one punch to make the point clear. Then Webb said if I didn't provide the statement they needed, what happened to Grant would look like a promotion compared to what would happen to me. Lawson felt rage building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm, analytical. You gave them the false statement. I did. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. They threatened you. Lawson leaned forward. But you're here now, which means you're willing to tell the truth. That took more courage than you realize. Martinez pulled a flash drive from her pocket, sliding it across the table. There's more. I've been documenting things for 3 months, ever since Hayes started targeting me. Why you? Because I'm good at my job, and I'm a woman, and those two things together make him feel threatened. Martinez's voice hardened. He started with small things, assigning me the worst duties, criticizing everything I did in front of the squad, accidentally leaving me off mission rosters. Then it escalated. Inappropriate comments about my body during PT, brushing up against me in confined spaces. 2 weeks ago, he cornered me in the armory and said if I wanted to advance my career, I should be friendlier to my commanding officers. Lawson's fists clenched under the table. What's on the drive? Audio recordings from my phone. I started keeping it running during training sessions. You can hear Hayes on several of them, the comments, the threats. There's also a video from last week, when he shoved Private Chun into a wall during night operations training. Chun didn't report it because Hayes told him it would be marked as a training accident, and Chun would be blamed for not paying attention. How many others has Hayes targeted? In the 2 years I've been here, at least 9 that I know of. Most were like Grant. They complained and got shipped out before anything could be done. 2 just requested transfers to other units to get away from him. 1 took a medical discharge after what Hayes called a training mishap that left him with a torn rotator cuff. Martinez paused. And then there's Sergeant Webb and the others who protect him. They're not just protecting him, Lawson said. Slowly, pieces clicking together. They're benefiting from the system he's created. Martinez nodded. Hayes runs the training certification program. He decides who gets advanced qualifications, who gets recommended for promotions, who gets the best assignments. If you're loyal to him, your career flourishes. If you cross him, you're finished. Webb knows that. So do Daniels Rodriguez and the rest of Hayes' inner circle. They've built their careers on being his enforcers. The waitress refilled their coffee, and both women went silent until she left. Lawson stared at the flash drive on the table between them, understanding the weight of what Martinez was offering. If you come forward with this, they'll retaliate. You know that. I know, Martinez said. But I've been thinking about something Grant told me before she left. She said the only way this ends is if enough people refuse to stay silent. 1 voice they can silence, 2 voices maybe. But if enough of us speak up. She left the sentence unfinished, hope and fear warring in her expression. Lawson picked up the flash drive, slipping it into her pocket. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest. Are you doing this to help me, or are you doing this because you want Hayes stopped? Martinez considered the question carefully. Both. What he did to you was wrong, and you deserve justice. But this is bigger than one incident. Hayes has created a culture where abuse is normalized, where speaking up means career suicide, where soldiers are more afraid of their commanding officer than they are of actual combat. That has to stop, even if it costs me everything. It might. I know, but I joined the army to serve my country with honor. There's no honor in protecting predators. Lawson felt a surge of respect for the young private. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with my legal counsel, a civilian attorney my father connected me with who specializes in military justice. You're going to tell him everything you told me, on the record. He'll advise us on how to proceed in a way that protects you as much as possible. What if they find out I talked to you? They probably already suspect. Webb isn't stupid, he'll notice you're not falling in line like the others. Lawson pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. I'm going to have someone pick you up from your quarters tomorrow at 0700. Her name is Captain Diane Foster. You can trust her. Martinez looked uncertain. How do you know? Because she came to warn me today when she didn't have to. Because she's been in the Army long enough to recognize what's happening, and she's still willing to fight it. Lawson paused. And because right now, we need to identify everyone we can trust. This investigation is going to get ugly, and Hayes has more allies than we do. What about the other victims? Grant Chun, the others? If we can find them and they're willing to testify, their accounts will strengthen the case. But we can't force anyone to come forward. They have to make that choice themselves. Lawson's expression darkened. What we need is to prove this is a pattern, not isolated incidents. Hayes has been getting away with this because he's careful, because the system protects him, and because his victims are scattered or silenced. But if we can show the tribunal that this is systematic abuse enabled by institutional failure, we change the entire narrative. Martinez absorbed this. You really think we can win? Lawson wanted to say yes to offer reassurance that justice would prevail. But she'd been in the military long enough to know better. I think we have a chance. A small one maybe, but a chance. The question is whether we're willing to take the risk. I am, Martinez said without hesitation. I'm tired of being afraid. They left the diner separately, Martinez first, checking the parking lot carefully before getting into her car. Lawson waited 15 minutes, nursing her coffee and thinking about everything she'd learned. The flash drive felt heavy in her pocket, a small piece of plastic that contained enough evidence to potentially dismantle Hayes' operation. But evidence only mattered if people were willing to listen. And in an institution that valued hierarchy and loyalty above all else, speaking truth to power came with consequences neither she nor Martinez could fully predict. As Lawson drove back toward Fort Carson, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay away from my soldiers, or what happened today will look like mercy. No signature, but she didn't need one. Hayes was making his position clear: back down, or face escalation. Lawson deleted the message and kept driving. She'd already made her choice the moment she defended herself on that training ground. Now it was just a matter of seeing it through. Regardless of the cost, the question wasn't whether she'd fight. The question was whether she'd survive what came next. Private first class. Jordan Martinez wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, though the diner was warm. The bruise on her jaw had darkened to purple, and up close, Lawson could see it wasn't the only mark. There were older, fading bruises on Martinez's neck, partially hidden by the hoodie. 6 months ago, there was another female soldier in the training program. Martinez began, her voice barely above a whisper. Staff Sergeant Nicole Grant. She was sharp, really sharp, better than most of Hayes' squad at tactical analysis. He hated that. Lawson listened without interrupting, though her jaw tightened. Grant questioned one of Hayes' training protocols. During a live-fire exercise, said it violated safety regulations, which it did. Hayes pulled her aside afterward, and we all heard the shouting from inside the equipment shed. When she came out 20 minutes later, her lip was bleeding, and she wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Did she report it? Martinez's laugh was bitter. She tried. Filed a complaint with her chain of command the next day. 72 hours later, she was reassigned to a supply depot in Kuwait. Her entire complaint disappeared from the system like it never existed. The official reason for her transfer? Unit cohesion concerns. Where is she now? No one knows. She finished her deployment. And then she just vanished. Some people say she took a medical discharge. Others say she's working private security somewhere. But before she left, she told me something. Martinez finally met Lawson's eyes. She said she wasn't the first. That Hayes had been doing this for years, and that the system was designed to protect him, not us. Lawson absorbed this, her mind racing through implications. Why didn't you come forward before today? Because I was scared. Because I watched what happened to Grant, and I knew that crossing Hayes meant destroying your career, or worse. Martinez's voice cracked. But when I saw what he did to you today, and when I saw you defend yourself, I realized someone finally had the courage to fight back. And I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The bruise on your face, Hayes? Martinez touched her jaw unconsciously. After the MPs took you away, Sergeant Webb gathered us all. Side we needed. To get our stories straight about what happened. I refused to lie. Webb got in my face, started pushing me, said I was either with the squad or against it. When I still wouldn't agree, She trailed off. Webb assaulted you, not just him. Private Daniels held my arms. It was quick, just one punch to make the point clear. Then Webb said if I didn't provide the statement they needed, what happened to Grant would look like a promotion compared to what would happen to me. Lawson felt rage building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm, analytical. You gave them the false statement. I did. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. They threatened you. Lawson leaned forward. But you're here now, which means you're willing to tell the truth. That took more courage than you realize. Martinez pulled a flash drive from her pocket, sliding it across the table. There's more. I've been documenting things for 3 months, ever since Hayes started targeting me. Why you? Because I'm good at my job, and I'm a woman, and those two things together make him feel threatened. Martinez's voice hardened. He started with small things, assigning me the worst duties, criticizing everything I did in front of the squad, accidentally leaving me off mission rosters. Then it escalated. Inappropriate comments about my body during PT, brushing up against me in confined spaces. 2 weeks ago, he cornered me in the armory and said if I wanted to advance my career, I should be friendlier to my commanding officers. Lawson's fists clenched under the table. What's on the drive? Audio recordings from my phone. I started keeping it running during training sessions. You can hear Hayes on several of them, the comments, the threats. There's also a video from last week when he shoved Private Chun into a wall during night operations training. Chun didn't report it because Hayes told him it would be marked as a training accident and Chun would be blamed for not paying attention. How many others has Hayes targeted? In the 2 years I've been here? At least 9. That I know of. Most were like Grant, they complained and got shipped out before anything could be done. 2 just requested transfers to other units to get away from him. 1 took a medical discharge after what Hayes called a training mishap that left him with a torn rotator cuff. Martinez paused. And then there's Sergeant Webb and the others who protect him. They're not just protecting him, Lawson said slowly, pieces clicking together. They're benefiting from the system he's created, Martinez nodded. Hayes runs the training certification program. He decides who gets advanced qualifications, who gets recommended for promotions, who gets the best assignments. If you're loyal to him, your career flourishes. If you cross him, you're finished. Webb knows that. So do Daniels Rodriguez and the rest of Hayes's inner circle. They've built their careers on being his enforcers. The waitress refilled their coffee, and both women went silent until she left. Lawson stared at the flash drive on the table between them, understanding the weight of what Martinez was offering. If you come forward with this, they'll retaliate. You know that. I know, Martinez said. But I've been thinking about something Grant told me before she left. She said the only way This ends as if enough people refuse to stay silent. One voice they can silence, two voices maybe. But if enough of us speak up. She left the sentence unfinished, hope and fear warring in her expression. Lawson picked up the flash drive, slipping it into her pocket. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest. Are you doing this to help me, or are you doing this because you want Hayes stopped? Martinez considered the question carefully. Both. What he did to you was wrong, and you deserve justice. But this is bigger than one incident. Hayes has created a culture where abuse is normalized, where speaking up means career suicide, where soldiers are more afraid of their commanding officer than they are of actual combat. That has to stop, even if it costs me everything. It might. I know, but I joined the army to serve my country with honor. There's no honor in protecting predators. Lawson felt a surge of respect for the young private. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with my legal counsel, a civilian attorney my father connected me with who specializes in military justice. You're going to tell him everything you told me, on the record. He'll advise us on how to proceed in a way that protects you as much as possible. What if they find out I talked to you? They probably already suspect. Webb isn't stupid, he'll notice you're not falling in line like the others. Lawson pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. I'm going to have someone pick you up from your quarters tomorrow at 0700. Her name is Captain Diane Foster. You can trust her. Martinez looked uncertain. How do you know? Because she came to warn me today when she didn't have to. Because she's been in the army long enough to recognize what's happening, and she's still willing to fight it. Lawson paused. And because right now, we need to identify everyone we can trust. This investigation is going to get ugly, and Hayes has more allies than we do. What about the other victims? Grant Chun, the others? If we can find them and they're willing to testify, their accounts will strengthen the case. But we can't force anyone to come forward. They have to make that choice themselves. Lawson's expression darkened. What we need is to prove this is a pattern, not isolated incidents. Hayes has been getting away with this because he's careful, because the system protects him, and because his victims are scattered or silenced. But if we can show the tribunal that this is systematic abuse enabled by institutional failure, we change the entire narrative. Martinez absorbed this. You really think we can win? Lawson wanted to say yes to offer reassurance that justice would prevail. But she'd been in the military long enough to know better. I think we have a chance. A small one maybe, but a chance. The question is whether we're willing to take the risk. I am, Martinez said without hesitation. I'm tired of being afraid. They left the diner separately, Martinez first, checking the parking lot carefully before getting into her car. Lawson waited 15 minutes, nursing her coffee and thinking about everything she'd learned. The flash drive felt heavy in her pocket, a small piece of plastic that contained enough evidence to potentially dismantle Hayes' operation, but evidence only mattered if people were willing to listen. And in an institution that valued hierarchy and loyalty above all else, speaking truth to power came with consequences neither she nor Martinez could fully predict. As Lawson drove back toward Fort Carson, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay away from my soldiers, or what happened today will look like mercy. No signature, but she didn't need one. Hayes was making his position clear. Back down, or face escalation. Lawson deleted the message and kept driving. She'd already made her choice the moment she defended herself on that training ground. Now it was just a matter of seeing it through, regardless of the cost. The question wasn't whether she'd fight. The question was whether she'd survive what came next. The law office of Richard Brennan occupied the third floor of a modest building in Colorado Springs, 20 miles from Fort Carson. Brennan had spent 22 years as a JAG officer before transitioning to civilian practice, specializing in defending military personnel against what he called institutional injustice. His office walls displayed framed certificates, commendations, and photographs with various service members, but also newspaper clippings, documenting cases where he'd taken on the Pentagon itself. When Lawson arrived at 0830 hours the next morning, Brennan was already reviewing documents spread across his conference table. He was 61, with silver hair cropped military short and eyes that missed nothing. Captain Foster sat in one corner, and Private Martinez occupied a chair near the window, looking like she'd barely slept. Lieutenant Lawson. Brennan stood, shaking her hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. Your father spoke highly of you. Sit. We have a lot to cover and not much time. How bad is it? Lawson asked, taking a seat. Worse than you think, but not hopeless. Brennan tapped a file folder. Colonel Hendricks arrived at Fort Carson last night. He's already interviewed Captain Hayes and is planning to depose key witnesses. Today, the preliminary hearing is scheduled for Monday 4 days from now. They're rushing this, which tells me they want you convicted before you can mount a proper defense. Foster leaned forward. Can they even do that? 4 days? In the military justice system, they can do almost anything if they justify it as mission critical. Hendricks is arguing that maintaining unit discipline requires swift resolution. What he really means is that the longer this drags out, the more likely uncomfortable truths will surface. Martinez spoke up, her voice tentative. I gave Mr. Brennan the flash drive. He's been listening to the recordings. Brennan's expression darkened. What Private Martinez documented is damning evidence of a hostile command environment. Captain Hayes makes explicit sexual comments, threatens subordinates, and brags about ending careers of soldiers who don't know their place. There's also clear evidence of retaliation against those who resist his authority. Will the tribunal admit it? Lawson asked. That's the challenge. The defense will argue these recordings were obtained without consent, violating wiretapping laws. However, Colorado is a one-party consent state, meaning Martinez had every right to record conversations she participated in. The bigger issue is relevance. Hendricks will claim that Hayes's past behavior, even if inappropriate, doesn't justify your use of force during the incident in question. So we prove it's part of a pattern, Foster said. Exactly, which is why we need more than just Martinez's testimony. Brennan pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. I've already started tracking down former members of Hayes's unit. Staff Sergeant Nicole Grant proved difficult to locate. She's essentially disappeared from public record after her discharge, but I found 2 others willing to talk. He slid photographs across the table. Former Private First Class Aaron Chun, now working as an EMT in Denver, and former Specialist Lisa Warren, currently enrolled at UC Boulder on a GI Bill. Both served under Hayes. Both left the unit under suspicious circumstances, and both are willing to provide depositions detailing their experiences. Lawson studied the photos. When can we talk to them? Sean is driving down this afternoon. Warren will be here tomorrow morning. But there's a complication. Neither wants to testify in person. They're terrified of retaliation, which is understandable, given what happened to Grant. Their depositions alone won't be enough, Foster said. Hendricks will shred them, claim they're disgruntled former soldiers with axes to grind. Agreed. Brennan stood, pacing as he spoke, a habit from decades of courtroom work, which is why we need someone from inside Hayes's current squad to break ranks. Someone who witnessed the assault and will contradict the official statements. All eyes turned to Martinez, who shook her head immediately. They won't. Webb is us. Them locked down tight. Even the ones who might want to tell the truth are too scared. What about the observers? Lawson asked. Master Sergeant Coleman and the other sergeant, they witnessed everything. Master Sergeant Coleman has already provided a statement supporting your account, Brennan confirmed. Unfortunately, Staff Sergeant Luis Marino, the other observer, has suddenly developed memory issues about the incident. His initial report stated he saw Hayes strike you, but in his formal deposition yesterday, he claimed his view was obstructed and he couldn't clearly see who initiated physical contact. Foster swore under her breath. They got to him. Almost. Certainly. Marino has 17 years of service and is up for promotion to Sergeant First Class next cycle. Someone convinced him that his career prospects depend on having a faulty memory. Brennan returned to his seat. This is what we're up against, a system where witnesses face consequences for telling the truth and rewards for maintaining the lie. Lawson felt frustration building, but forced herself to think tactically. What about physical evidence? Medical reports, surveillance footage? The medical report confirms you sustained facial trauma consistent with being struck. Hayes's injuries are consistent with your described defensive maneuver. As for surveillance, Brennan grimaced. The training ground cameras were conveniently malfunctioning that morning. IT records show they went offline at 0847 hours, 11 minutes before the incident. That's not a coincidence, Martinez said. No, it's not. Which suggests Hayes had help from someone with access to base security systems. Brennan made a note. I'm requesting a full audit of who accessed those systems that morning, but I expect that request to be denied or delayed. Foster stood abruptly, walking to the window. You realize what this means? This isn't just Hayes. There's institutional protection happening at multiple levels. Someone with real authority is running interference. I've reached the same conclusion, Brennan said. Which raises an important question. Why is Captain Hayes worth protecting? He's a mid-level officer in a training command, not someone with strategic importance or political connections. Unless he knows something, Lawson said slowly. Or he's connected to something bigger, Brennan pointed at her. That's the thread we need to pull. Hayes has been at Fort Carson for 11 years. That's an unusually long assignment for his rank and position. Most officers rotate every 3 to 4 years. So why has Hayes been allowed to stay? Martinez cleared her throat. I might know something about that. Hayes runs certification programs that feed into promotions and special assignments. He controls access to advanced tactical training, which is required for certain postings. If you want to move up an infantry command, you need his sign-off. So he's a gatekeeper, Foster said. And gatekeepers have leverage over everyone who needs to pass through the gate. Which means he likely has files, records, maybe even blackmail material on officers who've come through his program. Brennan's eyes gleamed with the thrill of a strategic opening. If we can prove Hayes has been trading favorable evaluations for favors or worse, covering up misconduct in exchange for protection, we transform this from a simple assault case into an institutional corruption investigation. Lawson's mind raced through implications. That would explain why they're rushing the trial. They want me convicted and silenced before we can expose the larger network. Precisely. Which is why our strategy needs to be twofold. Brennan began, ticking off points on his fingers. First, we defend you against the immediate charges by establishing clear self-defense. Second, we investigate and expose the corruption that's protecting Hayes. The first keeps you out of prison. The second ensures this doesn't happen to the next soldier who crosses him. How do we do both in 4 days? Foster asked. We don't. We do enough in 4 days to create reasonable doubt and delay the proceedings. Then we use that time to dig deeper. Brennan looked at each of them in turn. But I need to be clear about what we're committing to. If we go this route, we're not just fighting one corrupt officer. We're taking on everyone who's invested in keeping the system intact. That includes officers with decades of service, soldiers who've built careers on Hayes's approval, and possibly individuals outside the military who benefit from the current arrangement. What kind of individuals? Martinez asked. That's what we need to find out. But Hayes's financials show deposits that don't align with his military pay. Small amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there, always in cash, always just under the reporting threshold. Someone's paying him, and I doubt it's for legitimate consulting work. Lawson absorbed this new dimension of the problem. So Hayes isn't just an abuser. He's potentially involved in criminal activity. The evidence suggests it. Which means the people protecting him aren't just covering for a bad officer. They're protecting themselves from exposure. Brennan gathered his documents. This is your last chance to walk away, Lieutenant. You can accept a plea deal, take a reduction in rank and reassignment, avoid trial entirely. Many people would consider that the smart play. Lawson looked at Martinez, who sat straighter despite her obvious fear. She thought about Staff Sergeant Grant, disappeared into the system. About Aaron Chun and Lisa Warren, willing to speak truth despite their terror. About every soldier who'd suffered under Hayes and been told their experience didn't matter. I didn't defend myself on that training ground just to surrender now, Lawson said. We fight. Brennan smiled, the expression fierce and approving. Good. Then let's get to work. Martinez, I need you to identify every soldier who's left Hayes' unit in the past 3 years. Names, dates, reasons for transfer. Foster, use your connections to find out who's been interfering with the investigation. Someone with rank is making things disappear, and I want to know who. Lawson, you're going to write down every interaction you've ever had with Hayes. No matter how minor. We're looking for patterns, for mistakes he made, for anything that shows premeditation or malice. As they began working, Lawson felt something shift inside her. This had started as a simple act of self-defense, but it was becoming something larger, a fight not just for her own justice, but for every soldier who'd been silenced by a system that valued order over truth. Outside, the morning sun climbed. Higher over Colorado Springs, and somewhere at Fort Carson, Colonel Hendricks was building his case. The preliminary hearing was 4 days away, and one way or another, the truth about Captain Vincent Hayes was going to come out. The only question was whether the institution would allow that truth to matter. Aaron Chun arrived at Brennan's office at 1400 hours, wearing civilian clothes that hung loose on his frame, evidence of weight loss since his discharge. His handshake was firm, but his eyes carried the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust authority figures. Thank you for coming, Brennan said, gesturing to the conference room where Lawson and Martinez waited. I know this isn't easy. Chun studied each face before taking a seat. When Private Martinez reached out, I almost didn't respond. I spent 2 years trying to forget Fort Carson, trying to build a life where Captain Hayes doesn't exist. He paused. But then I read about what happened to you, Lieutenant. And I realized if I stayed silent now, I'd be complicit in whatever happens next. Lawson leaned forward. Tell us what happened to you. Chun's jaw tightened. I was assigned to Hayes' training unit in January 2017. I was good at my job, really good. Scored highest in my class on tactical assessment, earned my sergeant's stripes faster than most. Hayes noticed, but not in the way I expected. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. July 2017. We were running a night navigation exercise. Hayes had been riding me for weeks, questioning my decisions, undermining me in front of other soldiers, assigning me to degrading tasks. That night, he ordered me to climb a training tower to adjust some equipment. The equipment didn't need adjusting. That became clear later. What happened? Martinez asked softly. The ladder had been tampered with. Third rung from the top, someone had loosened the bolts. When my weight hit it, the rung gave way and I fell 20 feet onto concrete. Shattered my arm in 3 places, cracked 2 ribs, concussion. Chun's voice remained steady, but his hands trembled slightly. The investigation ruled it a training accident, equipment failure. No one's fault. But you don't believe that, Brennan said. I know it wasn't an accident. 2 days before the fall, I'd filed a formal complaint about Hayes with the Inspector General. I documented hostile work environment, discriminatory treatment, and safety violations in his training protocols. 72 hours later, I'm in a hospital bed being told I'm lucky to be alive. Lawson felt cold spreading through her chest. Did you tell the investigators about your complaint? I tried. They said there was no record of any IG complaint filed by me. The entire thing had vanished from the system, like it never existed. Chun's expression hardened. While I was recovering, Hayes visited me in the medical facility. Sat by my bed, told me how unfortunate the accident was, how these things happen in high-intensity training. Then he leaned in close and said, "Accidents can happen again if people aren't careful. Maybe next time to someone you care about." Martinez inhaled sharply. "He threatened your family?" "My younger sister was a sophomore at CU Boulder at the time. Hayes made sure I knew he knew exactly where she lived, what classes she took, what route she walked home." Chun's voice cracked slightly. "So I withdrew my complaint, or tried to, except there was officially no complaint to withdraw. I accepted the medical discharge, took my VA benefits and left. Haven't been back to Fort Carson since." Brennan had been recording everything. "Are you willing to testify to all of this under oath?" Chun was quiet for a long moment. "My sister graduates next spring. She's safe now, building her own life. If I testify, does that put her at risk again?" "I won't lie to you, there are risks," Brennan said carefully. "But Hayes is currently under investigation, and that investigation includes his pattern of retaliation. If anything happened to your sister now, it would directly implicate him. The scrutiny he's under actually makes you both safer than you were before. And if he's not convicted? If this whole thing gets buried like everything else?" Lawson spoke before Brennan could answer. "Then we're all at risk, me, Martinez, you, every soldier who's ever crossed him. The question isn't whether testifying is dangerous. It's whether staying silent is more dangerous in the long run." Chun studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll testify, but I want protection for my sister. Official protection, documented." "I'll make it happen," Brennan said, making notes. "I have contacts at the U.S. Marshal Service. We'll get her into a temporary protection program if necessary." The door opened and Captain Foster entered with a woman in her mid-20s, Lisa Warren, the former specialist Martinez had mentioned. Warren had dark circles under her eyes and kept her arms wrapped around herself like armor. "Sorry we're late," Foster said. Lisa wanted to make sure she wasn't followed. Warren took a seat, her eyes darting around the room. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I almost didn't come. I've spent 3 years trying to convince myself that what happened wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting, that I should just move on." "What did Hayes do to you?" Lawson asked gently. Warren's hands clenched. "I was 19 when I was assigned to his unit. Fresh out of basic, eager to prove myself. Hayes took an interest in me immediately, but it wasn't professional mentorship. He'd find reasons to keep me after training sessions, always alone. Started with comments about my appearance, then escalated to inappropriate touching during equipment checks." Martinez reached across the table, offering her hand. Warren took it gratefully. "One night in December 2016, Hayes ordered me to his office for what he said was a performance review. When I arrived, he locked the door." Warren's voice shook. "He cornered me against his desk, put his hands on me, said that soldiers who wanted to advance needed to show dedication to their commanding officers. I pushed him away and ran." "Did you report it?" Brennan asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Immediately. I went straight to my platoon sergeant, then to the company commander. I filed official sexual assault charges through proper channels. I did everything by the book." Warren's laugh was hollow. "Within a week, I was the one being investigated. Somehow there were reports of me drinking on duty, fraternizing with junior enlisted, stealing equipment. None of it was true, but the paperwork looked official. My credibility was destroyed before I could even give my statement. The charges against Hayes, dismissed due to lack of evidence. My word against his, and he was the respected captain, while I was the troubled young soldier with a suddenly questionable record. Warren wiped her eyes. I was given a choice: accept a general discharge and drop all accusations, or face court-martial for the fabricated charges. I took the discharge. I was 20 years old and terrified. Chun spoke up. It's the same pattern he used on all of U.S. Isolate the victim, destroy their credibility, manufacture evidence of misconduct, then offer a way out that requires silence. Which suggests Hayes has help from someone in administrative positions, Brennan said. You can't fabricate military records without access to personnel systems. You can't make IG complaints disappear without connections to investigative offices. Foster had been silent until now. I've been asking around carefully. There's a name that keeps coming up in connection with Hayes: Colonel Paul Vickers, the garrison commander. He and Hayes served together in Afghanistan in 2009. They're close enough that Vickers has blocked 3 separate attempts to transfer Hayes out of Fort Carson. Vickers has the authority and access to interfere with investigations, Brennan said thoughtfully. If he's protecting Hayes, it explains how complaints vanish and evidence gets manipulated. But why? Lawson asked. Why would a colonel risk his career protecting someone like Hayes? That's what we need to figure out. Brennan turned to Warren. And Chun, did either of you ever see Hayes meet with anyone suspicious? Receive packages? Discuss anything that seemed outside normal military operations? Warren frowned, concentrating. There was something. About 2 months before the assault, I was working late in the administrative office. Hayes came in with another officer, someone I didn't recognize, not from our unit. They went into the private records room and were in there for maybe 20 minutes. When they left, the officer was carrying a briefcase that he hadn't had when he arrived. Can you describe him? Older, maybe 50. Silver hair, expensive watch. I remember thinking it was weird, because military officers don't usually wear watches that nice. He had an air of authority, like he outranked Hayes significantly. Chun suddenly sat up straighter. I saw the same guy, or at least I think I did. He visited the training grounds once, stood with Hayes, observing an exercise. Hayes was acting different, deferential, almost nervous. After the visitor left, Hayes was in an unusually good mood. Gave the whole squad the rest of the day off, which never happened. Martinez pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. Could it be this man? She showed them a photo, a silver-haired officer in dress uniform covered in medals and ribbons. Warren and Chun leaned in, then nodded. That's him, Warren confirmed. Lawson looked at the phone. Who is he? Martinez's expression was grim. Brigadier General Robert Caldwell. He's the Deputy Commander of Operations for the entire 4th Infantry Division. If Hayes has protection from someone at that level, we're not just fighting a corrupt captain and his enablers. We're taking on the upper echelon of Fort Carson's command structure. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. What had seemed like a case of one abusive officer had just expanded into something far more complex and dangerous. Brennan finally spoke. This changes everything. If Caldwell is involved, he has the power to squash this investigation completely. He can transfer witnesses, lose evidence, and ensure the tribunal reaches whatever verdict he wants. So what do we do? Foster asked. Lawson stood, pacing to the window. Outside, traffic moved normally. People going about their lives unaware. That just floors above them. A conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military command was being unraveled. We document everything, she said finally. Every testimony, every connection, every piece of evidence. And we prepare for the possibility that the military justice system won't give us justice. What does that mean? Martinez asked. Brennan met Lawson's eyes with understanding. It means if the tribunal fails us, we take this public. We go to the media, to Congress, to anyone who'll listen. We make it impossible to bury. That would destroy all our careers, Foster said quietly. Maybe, Lawson agreed. But if we don't, Hayes destroys more lives. And officers like Caldwell continue enabling predators because they know the system will protect them. Warren stood as well, her voice stronger now. I already lost my career. Because of Hayes. If my story can prevent him from doing this to someone else, then it was worth it. Chun nodded in agreement. I'm in, whatever it takes. Martinez looked at each of them, then at Brennan. The preliminary hearing is in 3 days. Can we build a strong enough case by then? Brennan smiled grimly. We're about to find out. But, win or lose, we're going to make sure the truth gets told. All of it. As evening descended over Colorado Springs, the team continued working, gathering statements, building timelines, connecting pieces of a puzzle that revealed systematic corruption, protected by institutional power. The preliminary hearing would determine Lawson's immediate fate, but the larger battle was just beginning. And somewhere at Fort Carson, Brigadier General Caldwell was about to discover that the lieutenant who defended herself against Hayes wasn't going to be silenced as easily as the others had been. The preliminary hearing convened at 900 hours on Monday morning in a secure courtroom within Fort Carson's JAG building. The room was smaller than Lawson had imagined. Plain white walls, fluorescent lighting, a judge's bench flanked by American flags. Lieutenant Colonel Angela Reeves presided, her expression carefully neutral as both sides assembled. Colonel Marcus Hendricks sat at the prosecution table, surrounded by files and legal pads, projecting an air of absolute confidence. Beside him were 2 junior JAG officers, both already taking notes though nothing had started. Across the aisle, Lawson sat with Richard Brennan, who had been granted special permission to represent her alongside a military co-counsel. Captain Hayes sat in the front row of the gallery, his arm in a sling, a detail Lawson noted with suspicion, given that his medical report mentioned no injury requiring immobilization. Sergeant Webb and the rest of Hayes's squad occupied the seats behind him, a united front of hostile stares. On Lawson's side of the room sat Captain Foster, Private Martinez, and a handful of other soldiers who'd quietly shown support. Aaron, Chun and Lisa Warren had positions near the back, both looking like they might bolt at any moment. This preliminary hearing will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed to general court-martial. Reeves began, her voice carrying authority honed over 23 years of military service. Colonel Hendricks, present your case. Hendricks rose smoothly. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson assaulted Captain Vincent Hayes, a superior officer, during a training exercise. The assault resulted in significant physical injury and occurred in front of multiple witnesses. Captain Hayes has served this nation with distinction for 11 years. Lieutenant Lawson has been at Fort Carson for less than 1 year. The defendant's claim of self-defense is contradicted by 8 eyewitnesses who will testify that she initiated violence without provocation. He called Sergeant Webb first. Webb took the stand with military precision, his testimony rehearsed and delivered with conviction. According to him, Lawson had become increasingly insubordinate throughout the training exercise, had verbally attacked Hayes when questioned about her tactical decisions, and had struck the captain when he'd attempted to calm the situation with a hand gesture. Captain Hayes never made physical contact with Lieutenant Lawson, Webb stated firmly. She attacked him unprovoked, using military combatives training to inflict maximum damage on an officer who was simply trying to maintain discipline. Brennan's cross-examination was surgical. Sergeant Webb, how long have you served under Captain Hayes? 4 years, sir. And in those 4 years, how many soldiers have been transferred out of his unit due to complaints or conflicts? Hendricks objected. Relevance, Your Honor. I'm establishing a pattern of witness bias, Brennan countered. Reeves considered, then nodded. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Sergeant. Webb's confidence flickered. I don't have exact numbers. More than 10. More than 20? Personnel transfers happen for many reasons. Answer the question. Perhaps 15 or so. Brennan pulled out a document. According to official records, 23 soldiers have been transferred from Captain Hayes's unit in the past 3 years, a rate 4 times higher than any comparable unit at Fort Carson. Were all those transfers voluntary? I can't speak to. Were you present on July 15, 2017, when Private First Class Aaron Chun fell from a training tower, sustaining life-threatening injuries? Webb's jaw tightened. Yes. Did you participate in the investigation of that incident? I provided a statement. In your statement, you claimed the ladder failure was due to equipment age and weather conditions. But maintenance records show that ladder had been inspected and certified safe just 2 days prior. Were you aware of that? I'm not a maintenance specialist. No, but you are Captain Hayes's most loyal subordinate. Tell me, Sergeant, what happens to soldiers in his unit who don't show the same loyalty you do? Hendricks objected again, and this time Reeves sustained it, but the seed had been planted. Brennan called each of Hayes's squad numbers in turn, methodically exposing inconsistencies in their stories, small details that didn't align, timelines that shifted, observations that contradicted physical evidence. Then came Master Sergeant Patricia Coleman. Unlike Hayes's squad, she showed no nervousness, no hesitation. I was positioned approximately 30 meters from the incident, with clear line of sight. Captain Hayes struck Lieutenant Lawson across the face with sufficient force to snap her head to the side. Lieutenant Lawson's response was immediate and defensive in nature. She used appropriate force to neutralize a threat from a superior officer who had just committed assault. Hendricks's cross-examination barely dented Coleman's testimony. She'd been in the Army for 19 years, had observed thousands of training exercises, and her credibility was unimpeachable. Brennan then called Aaron Chun, the former soldier's testimony about his accident and Hayes's subsequent threats sent ripples through the courtroom. When Hendricks tried to discredit him as a disgruntled veteran, Brennan produced Chun's service records, exemplary performance evaluations, until his final months under Hayes, when suddenly his ratings plummeted despite no change in his actual performance. Lisa Warren's testimony was devastating. She described the sexual assault in clinical detail, then explained how the system had destroyed her credibility and forced her into silence. When she finished, several people in the gallery were visibly shaken. Your Honor, Brennan said, standing. I move to introduce evidence of a pattern of abuse, retaliation, and institutional cover-up spanning multiple years and involving multiple high-ranking officers. He laid out everything: Martinez's recordings, financial records showing unexplained deposits into Hayes's accounts, documentation of disappeared complaints, evidence of Colonel Vickers's interference with investigations. Then came the connection to Brigadier General Caldwell. We have testimony placing General Caldwell in private meetings with Captain Hayes, accessing personnel records without proper authorization, and carrying documents out of secure areas. We believe Captain Hayes has been providing favorable training, certifications, and manipulated performance evaluations in exchange for protection and possibly financial compensation. This corruption network extends to the highest levels of Fort Carson's command. The courtroom erupted. Hendricks was on his feet, objecting strenuously. Hayes looked like he might vomit. But Reeves raised her hand for silence, her expression transformed from neutral to coldly furious. These are serious allegations, Mr. Brennan, which is why I'm requesting this preliminary hearing be suspended, pending a full criminal investigation by the Army Criminal Investigation Command, not just of Captain Hayes, but of everyone who enabled and protected him. Reeves turned to Hendricks. "Colonel, does the prosecution have any response to these allegations?" Hendricks looked genuinely blindsided. He'd been brought in to prosecute a simple assault case and had just walked into a corruption scandal. "Your Honor, I need time to review this evidence." "As do I." Reeves gathered her files. "This hearing is suspended for 72 hours. In the meantime, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into all allegations presented here. Captain Hayes, you are confined to quarters pending investigation. Sergeant Webb, you are also confined to quarters. Lieutenant Lawson, you're administrative. Leave continues, but all charges are stayed pending the outcome of this investigation." She fixed Hayes with a stare that could cut steel. "Captain, I have presided over military justice for 2 decades, and I have never seen such a comprehensive breakdown of military order and discipline. If even half of what's been alleged here is true, you've betrayed everything this institution stands for." Hayes tried to speak, but no words came out. 3 weeks later, the full investigation concluded. Captain Vincent Hayes was formally charged with assault, sexual harassment, abuse of authority, financial crimes, and conspiracy. Sergeant Webb and 4 members of Hayes's squad faced charges of witness tampering, assault, and obstruction of justice. Colonel Paul Vickers was court-martialed for dereliction of duty and corruption. Brigadier General Robert Caldwell was the biggest shock. Investigators discovered he'd been running a scheme where favorable evaluations and training certifications were sold to officers willing to pay. Hayes had been one of several officers facilitating the operation across multiple bases. Caldwell was stripped of his rank and sentenced to 8 years in military prison. All charges against Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson were dropped with prejudice. She received a formal apology from the 4th Infantry Division commander and was offered her choice of assignments. Private First Class Jordan Martinez was promoted to specialist and transferred to a new unit, where her courage in coming forward earned respect from commanders who actually valued integrity. Aaron Chun received a full disability rating and compensation for his injuries. Lisa Warren was granted an honorable discharge revision and access to victim services. She'd been denied years earlier. 6 months after the preliminary hearing, Lawson stood at the same training ground where everything had started. She'd accepted a position as an instructor at West Point, where she could help shape the next generation of officers, teaching them not just tactics and leadership, but the moral courage to stand against abuse regardless of rank. Captain Diane Foster had been promoted to major and assigned to Fort Carson's newly established Office of Integrity and Accountability, a direct result of the scandal, tasked with preventing future abuses. The story had broken nationally. Congressional hearings were held. The Army implemented new reporting procedures, independent oversight for assault allegations, and mandatory training on ethical leadership. It wasn't perfect. Institutional change never happened overnight, but it was progress. Hayes himself received a dishonorable discharge and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for his crimes. On the day of his sentencing, Lawson attended, not for revenge but to bear witness, to see accountability finally served. As he was led away in handcuffs, Hayes looked at her one last time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been regret or simply self-pity. Lawson felt nothing but relief that he could never hurt another soldier again. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Lawson gave a brief statement. "I didn't set out to change the system. I just refused to accept that defending myself was wrong. Every soldier who came forward after me, they're the real heroes. They risked everything to ensure the truth came out." Martinez stood beside her, along with Chun, Warren, and a dozen other former victims who'd found the courage to speak up once they knew they weren't alone. That evening, back at her quarters, Lawson received an email from someone she'd been trying to locate for months. Staff Sergeant Nicole Grant, the soldier who disappeared after filing her complaint years earlier. Lieutenant Lawson, the email read, I've been following your case. From afar, what you did, what all of you did, gave me hope that the system can work when people refuse to stay silent. I'm not ready to come forward publicly yet, but I wanted you to know that you saved lives. Not just the soldiers Hayes would have hurt in the future, but people like me who thought we were alone. Thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away. You reminded me why I joined the Army in the first place. Lawson read the email twice, then saved it. Grant was right. It would have been easier to accept a plea deal, to let the system bury the truth, to prioritize her own career over justice. But easy had never been the point. She thought about that moment on the training ground, those 2 seconds when everything changed. Hayes had expected her to accept the assault, to submit like all the others before her. Instead, she defended herself, and in doing so, had sparked a reckoning that exposed years of corruption. The slap had been meant to silence her. Instead, it became the catalyst that gave voice to every soldier Hayes had victimized, every person the system had failed, and every truth that institutional power had tried to bury. Justice hadn't been inevitable. It had required courage from people like Martinez who risked retaliation to tell the truth. It demanded persistence from attorneys like Brennan, who refused to accept easy answers. It needed allies like Foster who used their positions to protect whistleblowers. And it required a system, however flawed, that still had enough people of integrity to hold wrongdoers accountable when given undeniable evidence. As Lawson looked out at Fort Carson's lights in the distance, she understood that this victory, significant as it was, represented just one battle in a much longer war. But it was a battle won, a precedent set, and a message sent to every soldier serving in uniform. Speaking truth to power isn't just allowed, it's essential to preserving the values the military exists to defend. Captain Vincent Hayes had thought one slap would put Lieutenant Rebecca Lawson in her place. Instead, those 2 seconds changed everything for her, for the soldiers she'd saved, and for an institution that had just learned a painful but necessary lesson about accountability. Fight wasn't over, but for the first time in years, justice had won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.